the velvet curtain tears open with a violence that stops the room cold. Aria Hartley crashes through like a bird with broken wings, her body moving in pure animal desperation. She is 27 years old but carries the exhaustion of someone twice that age. Her maid's uniform is torn at the shoulder, the white collar stained dark with blood trickling from a gash at her temple. Her hair, once carefully pinned, is matted to her pale face with sweat and blood. Her hands shake as if the cold has gotten into her bones. Her breath comes in ragged gasps, the sound of someone who has been running for her life. The underground poker room smells of cigar smoke and cologne so expensive it costs more than she has ever owned at once. 30 men sit frozen mid-motion. Cards hover above the green felt tables. Whiskey glasses pause at lips. Cigarettes burn forgotten between trembling fingers. Silence swallows everything. At the head table, 3 men do not move. Luca Castellano sits in the center chair, his frame taking up space like a force of nature. He is tall, broad-shouldered, built like someone who understands violence in his bones. His suit is black wool, tailored perfectly, the kind that costs more than Aria's annual rent. His white shirt is unbuttoned at the neck, showing the solid chest beneath. His hair is dark, silvered at the temples. His eyes are storm gray, the color of a winter that never ends. A thin scar runs from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone like a blade wrapped in silk. On his left wrist, a gold watch worth more than a house. On his right hand, silver rings that catch the light. Vinny and Nino flank him on either side, identical in their stillness, identical in the way their hands rest on the table. They have been watching Luca's back for 8 years. They have never seen anything like this. Aria's wild eyes scan the room. She does not recognize Luca Castellano as the man whose daughter Emma she pulled from traffic 2 weeks ago on a dusty Las Vegas street. That man wore a different face. That man was a stranger. This man is a target. This man is power. This man is someone who matters. The curtain rips open again. Douglas Hale barrels through like an animal, his face twisted with rage so pure it seems to poison the air around him. He is 43 years old and built like a boxer, all corded muscle and violence waiting to happen. His shirt is unbuttoned and stained with her blood. His eyes are black and empty. He has been looking for Aria for 3 days. He means to finish what he started 3 months ago. Aria does the only thing she can think to do. She reaches across the table. She grabs the whiskey glass sitting in front of Luca Castellano. The glass is crystal, expensive, the kind of glass that belongs to the kind of man who never goes without. She lifts it. She hurls it at Douglas with every ounce of desperate strength remaining in her body. The glass shatters against Douglas's chest. Whiskey explodes across his shirt like blood. Then Aria turns. She looks directly at Luca Castellano, this man she does not know, and she slaps him across the face with her palm open and her arm straight. The sound cracks through the underground room like a gunshot in a canyon. 30 armed men reach for their weapons at once. The sound is metal on metal, a chorus of threat about to become something worse. Marco, standing by the door, moves toward her. Enzo, the youngest, his hand on his weapon, takes a step forward. Luca raises one hand. It is a small movement. His fingers extend just slightly, and the entire room stops. 30 men who have killed for less than an insult, 30 men who understand violence like a language, 30 men with weapons in their hands and death in their hearts all freeze. The hand of one man silences them completely. Luca's eyes lock on Aria's face. Something shifts in his expression. It is not anger. It is not the expression of a man who has just been struck by a bleeding woman in front of all his lieutenants. It is something else entirely. It is recognition, but not of her face. It is something deeper. Something that moves through his body like a current. Douglas lunges forward, his hand reaching for Aria's throat. Vinny is faster. He stands, and his hand connects with Douglas's jaw before the thought of violence fully forms in Douglas's mind. Douglas crashes to the ground like a stone statue with its strings cut. He does not get back up. His body does not move. His breath comes in shallow rasps. The room is so quiet you can hear the electric hum of the lights overhead and the sound of Aria's breathing, still ragged, still terrified, still believing she might die in the next few seconds. Luca stands. He is 6 feet 1 inch tall, and when he stands, the entire room shifts. Marco exchanges a look with Enzo that says everything without words. In 15 years of working for Luca Castellano, they have never seen him stand for a woman like this. They have never seen him move from his seat to approach someone with this deliberate care. He walks toward Aria. His movements are controlled. Each step is measured. His footsteps on the marble floor are the only sound in the room besides her breath. Up close, Aria can see the scar on his face more clearly. She can see the gold watch that probably costs more than the car she used to drive before she sold it. She can see his eyes, and something in those eyes makes her want to run or surrender, she is not sure which. Take her to the back room, Luca says, and his voice is deep and solid like an oath, like something carved from stone. Get her water. Get her medical supplies. The bleeding stops now. He turns to Vinny. Douglas Hale leaves here in a body bag or a prison transport. Make a decision quickly. But he leaves. Vinny nods. His hand still rests on Douglas's collar. Douglas does not move. Douglas does not fight. Douglas is broken in the way that only men broken by the fear of death can be broken. Aria is moving. A woman she does not recognize, older, with kind eyes that seem impossible in this place of violence and smoke, is leading her by the elbow through a door that was not there a moment ago. The woman is speaking to her in a low voice, saying things like "You are safe now" and "Let us get that bleeding stopped," and Aria is moving through a hallway lined with exposed brick and expensive art that cost more than her entire life. But what she did not know was that this single slap, this moment of desperation and violence, had just exposed her to the one man in Las Vegas who could either save her or destroy her. And she did not know that Douglas Hale answered directly to a woman named Victoria Ashford. She did not know that Victoria had spent 15 years poisoning every official in Clark County, buying judges and cops and city officials the way other people bought coffee. She did not know that the slap she just delivered, the act of desperation that felt like nothing, had just handed Luca Castellano the leverage he needed to drag his enemies into the dry October cold where federal agents were already moving into position, already closing in, already waiting for exactly this kind of opening. None of this mattered to Aria. What mattered was that her temple had stopped bleeding. What mattered was that she was breathing. What mattered was that she had $5 in her pocket and 7 days before the bank took the only thing she had left in the world. Now rewind. Let us go back 7 days before the slap that would change everything. 7 days before Aria Hartley crashed through a velvet curtain and into the life of a man who answers to no one but himself. 7 days before she became something other than invisible. Let us go back to the beginning, to the moment when she had exactly $5 in her pocket and exactly $22,000 in mortgage debt coming due, and a grandmother's recipe book with margin notes that might save her life if anyone in the world was willing to read them. Let us go back to the night that started everything. $78. That is everything. Aria Hartley stands in her grandmother's kitchen at 6:15 in the morning, and the yellow lamplight catches the wrinkles in the bills she has spread across the cracked Formica counter. Crumpled ones, a few 5s, 3 20s folded so many times they have begun to tear at the creases. Her fingers are trembling as she counts them again, as if a different number might appear if she just counts one more time. It never does. $78 is what remains between her and complete erasure. The foreclosure notice sits beside her grandmother's recipe book. That book is the only thing of value she inherited, bound in faded cloth, its pages yellow to the color of old teeth. Margin notes in her grandmother's handwriting run up the sides of each recipe, tiny script describing memories, secrets, the exact moment the cinnamon rolls needed to come out of the oven, warnings about which spices would overpower the others. Someone might pay for this. A cookbook collector, a restaurant historian, someone who understood that this book was not just recipes but a woman's entire life documented in flour and sugar and love. But Aria has no time to find that someone. She has 7 days. The bank has given her exactly 7 days before they take this house, before they take this kitchen, before they take the only place on earth where her grandmother's voice still lives in the margins. She pulls on her black and white maid's uniform, careful not to catch it on the rough edge of the chair. The uniform is a year old and worn thin at the elbows. Her name is stitched in red thread over the pocket, Aria. One name, as if she were a single element of the hotel rather than a person. She keeps her head down, her eyes on the tile floor as she leaves the house. Invisible. This is how she survives, by being so unremarkable that people forget her the moment she leaves the room. The Belmont Hotel sprawls across downtown Las Vegas like a fortress made of glass and steel. 22 stories. 300 rooms. Aria is one of 8 maids assigned to the 9th floor, and she moves through those hallways like a ghost, quiet and faithful and invisible. Room 907. She knocks 3 times, waits, enters. The Do Not Disturb sign hangs from the outside handle. She leaves it there, straightens the bed, wipes down the bathroom, replaces the towels. The guest tips $2. She thanks them and leaves. The day stretches out in identical rooms, identical tasks, identical moments of invisibility. Room 914. Room 923. Room 931. The digital clock in the hallway reads 3:22 p.m. when she finishes her shift. She has earned $43 today. That brings her total to $121. She still needs $21,879 in the next 6 days. She takes the bus to her second job, a diner on Charleston Boulevard where she works the dinner shift. The bus lurches and stops, and the homeless man sitting across from her smells like the street and broken dreams. No one makes eye contact. The city moves past the windows in shades of brown and gray and the particular color of exhaust. The afternoon sun is beginning its descent, and the desert wind carries the smell of hot asphalt and the faint, impossible sweetness of someone's perfume lingering in the recycled air. The diner is called Marie's, though no one named Marie has owned it in 30 years. The current owner is a man named Jack who pays minimum wage and keeps the thermostat set to 60 degrees to save money on air conditioning. The dinner rush begins at 5 o'clock. Aria ties her apron, checks her order pad, and becomes even more invisible than she is in the hotel. Here she is simply the person who brings the food, who clears the plates, who refills the coffee while men in business suits discuss quarterly earnings and women in designer dresses pick at salads they could afford not to eat. At 6:16 p.m., as she is carrying a tray of iced tea toward table 7, she sees a man and a woman arguing in low voices at the bar. The woman is in her 50s, expensive blonde hair, a thin gold bracelet catching the light. The man with her is younger, mid-30s, and his jaw is tight with anger. He is saying something about money, about insufficient contributions, about how someone called Victoria is growing impatient. The woman touches his arm. He pulls away like her hand is burning him. Aria does not hear the name Victoria. She hears the tone, fear wrapped in anger, the sound of someone caught between 2 impossible choices. She moves past them. Not her problem. Not her world. She has her own survival to manage. At 10:15 p.m., the dinner rush ends. Aria wipes down the counter for the last time, exchanges her apron for her thin jacket, and steps out into the October night. The temperature has dropped. Winter is coming early this year, or perhaps it is just the desert. It moves between extremes without warning, without mercy. The wind cuts through her jacket like she is wearing nothing at all. She walks toward home, and her breath makes small clouds in the darkness. She does not see the black SUV parked across the street. She does not see the man watching her from the driver's seat, his face hidden by shadows and the reflection of streetlights on glass. 3 blocks from her apartment, Douglas finds her. He steps out of the darkness between 2 buildings, and her heart stops. Douglas Hale is 52 years old and carries his years like weapons. His face is handsome in the way dangerous things are handsome, sharp lines, cold eyes, a smile that looks like a threat. They dated for 8 months. She ended it 3 months ago. He has not accepted this. He has not accepted that her answer was no, that no meant no, that she meant it. Aria. He says her name like it tastes bad in his mouth. Douglas. Her voice is barely a whisper, barely a breath. Leave me alone. He moves closer. The streetlight catches his face, and she sees his jaw is tight, his eyes burning with the kind of rage that has nowhere to go. You think you can just disappear? You think you can just erase me from your life like I don't matter? You don't have to leave, she says. Her hands are shaking. You can leave right now and we can both be fine. He grabs her wrist. His fingers dig in hard enough that she knows there will be bruises tomorrow, dark purple marks shaped like his anger. He pulls her against the brick wall of the building behind them. The rough surface scrapes her back through the thin fabric of her jacket. I know where you live, he says. His breath smells like whiskey. I know where you work. Both places. I know the bus you take at 3:47 in the afternoon. I know you eat lunch at that diner on 5th and Main every Tuesday. I know you keep your grandmother's recipe book on the kitchen table. I know all of it, Aria, because I pay attention to the things I own. I am not yours, she says. The words come out stronger than she feels. I was never yours. He raises his hand. She flinches. But he does not hit her. Instead, he leans in close enough that she can see the burst blood vessels in his eyes, close enough to smell the rot underneath his cologne. The cops won't help you. I know them. I know their names and their wives' names and where their kids go to school. They are my friends. You understand? There is no help coming. There is no escape. You are mine, and you will remember that. He releases her wrist. She stumbles backward, and he watches her with those cold eyes for a long moment. Then he walks back toward his car, leaves her standing against the brick wall in the desert cold, her wrist throbbing, her heart hammering so hard she thinks it might break her ribs. She calls 911 from her apartment, her hand still shaking so badly she has to dial the number 3 times before she gets it right. What is the nature of your emergency? The dispatcher's voice is bored, rehearsed, empty of urgency. My ex-boyfriend threatened me. He grabbed me. He knows where I live and where I work, and he said the police won't help because... Did he hit you? No, but... Did he make a specific threat of bodily harm? He said he owns me. He said he knows where my apartment is, where I work. He said the police are his friends, he said. I'm going to take your information, but unless he made a direct threat of violence, there's not much we can do tonight. We can put an incident report on file. An incident report. A file. Aria gives her name and address and the dispatcher's voice never changes. She is not a person. She is a case number. She hangs up the phone and sits in her apartment in the dark, waiting for something that never comes. No knock on the door. No police car pulling up outside. No help arriving in the night. She has called the only people who are supposed to protect her, and they have decided that her fear is not enough. Her terror does not meet their threshold for action. She does not sleep. 2 days pass in a kind of fog, and on the 3rd day, something shifts. Aria is on the 9th floor of the Belmont, cleaning room 918, when she hears 2 men in the hallway outside her door. They are dressed in expensive suits that cost more than everything she owns combined. They are talking about an underground poker game. A real game. High stakes. Important people. One of them mentions the location, a warehouse on Fremont Street, near the railroad tracks, in the industrial part of the city where the buildings have been abandoned for decades. She commits the address to memory. Room 1247 Fremont Street. No name given, just an address and a time, 11 p.m. on Friday night. An idea begins to form in her mind. An impossible, dangerous idea. She has $5 to her name. The bank will take everything in 4 days. But what if someone at that game had money? What if someone important enough to be at that kind of table might listen to her story? What if she could walk in there and beg for help, not charity, but a loan? A chance? Anything. The idea is crazy. But staying still is also crazy. At least the crazy idea is something she can do. That night, she takes her grandmother's recipe book and drives to a used bookstore on Spring Mountain Road. The owner is a man named Mr. Chen, with thin glasses and careful hands. He examines the book slowly, turning the pages, reading the margin notes, nodding to himself. "This is special," he says. His voice is quiet, respectful. "Your grandmother was a careful cook. These notes, they tell a story." "How much?" Aria's voice is steady, even though her heart is pounding. "For a cookbook in this condition, with this kind of provenance? I can give you $4,000. $4,000. It is not enough. It is not nearly enough. But it is something. It is a start." She accepts, and the money sits in her pocket like a secret, like hope, like a rope being lowered into a very deep well. On Friday night, the temperature drops below 50 degrees. The desert wind howls down Fremont Street, carrying the smell of rain that will never fall, carrying the cold from 1,000 miles away. Aria parks her car 3 blocks from the warehouse and walks, her borrowed dress, borrowed from a coworker, hanging loose on her thin frame. The warehouse looms above her, dark, windowless, guarded by a man in a black suit who does not look at her twice. She walks past him. She has nothing to lose. She has already lost everything. The velvet curtain separates 2 worlds. On one side, people like her. The noise and chaos of ordinary life. On the other side, the poker game. Silence. Power. 30 men in suits worth more than years of her labor, sitting at tables with stacks of money piled like monuments to their own importance. She does not get to step through that curtain with questions. Douglas Hale appears behind her, bleeding rage, blocking the only exit. His hands reach for her throat. And Aria Hartley does something she has never done before. She does not run. She does not freeze. She grabs a whiskey glass from a passing server and hurls it at Douglas as he lunges toward her. The glass shatters against the wall behind him. She shoves through the velvet curtain. 30 men turn to look at her. Their faces register shock, confusion, the intrusion of chaos into their carefully ordered world. At the head table sits a man she has never seen before. He is tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the kind of face that was handsome before power wore it into something harder. His suit is black, tailored, fitted across a chest that speaks of wealth and control. A thin scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone. His eyes are storm gray, and when they land on her, she feels recognized in a way that terrifies her. Luca Castelliano has not been surprised by anything in 15 years. But in this moment, with Douglas crashing through the curtain behind this desperate, terrified woman, everything changes. Aria does not know his name. She does not know that she saved his daughter Emma from traffic 2 weeks ago. She does not know that this man has been searching for the woman who pulled his child from the street and refused payment, refused to accept his gratitude, refused to be anything other than kind. She does not know that her face has been showing in his dream since that afternoon on the dusty Las Vegas street. She only knows that he is here, that he is powerful, that 30 armed men will listen to him. She raises her hand. And she slaps him across the face, hard enough that the sound echoes like a gunshot in the absolute silence of the room. The October wind tore through the empty streets like a blade wrapped in ice. Aria Hartley walked with her shoulders hunched, her hotel maid's uniform stained with coffee from a guest who had spilled it intentionally, laughing as she knelt to clean the floor. Her pocket contained exactly $5. 5. She had spent the rest on bread and instant coffee, rationing enough to last for more days if she ate 1 meal instead of 2. The foreclosure notice sat on her kitchen table at home, and the numbers on it did not change no matter how many times she looked. $22,000. 7 days remaining. She did not cry anymore. Her tears had dried up somewhere between her grandmother's funeral and the moment a bank official had handed her an envelope marked final notice. Her grandmother had raised her, had taught her to cook from a recipe book now filled with margin notes in fading handwriting. Those notes were the only inheritance that mattered: instructions for bread that lasted, soup that fed a family for 3 days, ways to make nothing into something. But even that would not save the house. The wind bit at her face. Her shift had ended at 9, and she had chosen the back streets instead of the main road, a route that added 15 minutes to her walk home but felt safer. Felt being the operative word. Safety was something other people had. She turned the corner onto her block and saw him immediately. Douglas Hale stood outside her apartment building, his jacket open despite the cold, his hands shoved in his pockets. Waiting. He had been waiting for 3 months, ever since she had told him no and meant it. No to his apologies. No to his promises. No to the violence he called love. Her body went rigid. Every cell in her screamed a single word: run. She ran. Her shoes were worn thin at the heels, the soles nearly smooth. Douglas's footsteps behind her were heavy and confident, the footsteps of someone who had never had to chase anything small. He closed the distance in blocks. 1, 2, 3. His breathing stayed steady. Hers fractured into pieces. She was not fast enough. She was never fast enough. But she was desperate, and desperation moves through the body like electricity. The warehouse on Fremont Street appeared ahead like a promise she was not sure she could keep. She had passed it 100 times, had seen the men in suits moving through its doors, had heard the whispers about the card games that happened in its depths. The kind of place where power gathered and people listened. The kind of place where a scream might mean something. She ran toward it. Douglas caught her half a block away. His hand came down on the back of her neck, and he slammed her forward. Her head connected with the brick wall of an abandoned storefront. The impact was a white explosion behind her eyes. Pain bloomed like a flower of broken glass. When she pulled away, blood was streaming from her temple, warm and steady, running down her cheekbone. She kicked backward, felt her heel connect with something that made him grunt. His grip loosened. She twisted free and ran, her vision blurring at the edges, the October air burning her throat. The warehouse door was heavy. She hit it with her full body weight and it swung inward. A guard sat just inside, smoking a cigarette, looking bored until he saw her, the maid's uniform torn, the blood, the absolute terror in her eyes. He stood, confused, and in that moment of confusion, she ran past him. The hallway smelled like money and danger. She could smell both, could identify them the way a hunted animal identifies a predator. Leather and cigar smoke and something else, something metallic and cold. Men's voices came from behind a velvet curtain. Laughter. The soft clink of glasses. She ran toward the voices because silence meant she was alone, and alone meant Douglas would finish what he had started 3 months ago on a night she was trying very hard not to remember. She crashed through the curtain at 11:43 p.m. 30 men turned to look at her. They turned in unison, their heads swiveling like machines programmed for the same motion. The room froze. Time did that sometimes, stopped moving forward, created a moment where everything and nothing could happen simultaneously. At the head table sat a man she had never seen before. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a black suit tailored to fit a body built by decades of control. His dark hair was brushed back from a face that had been handsome once, before power wore it into something harder and colder. A thin scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone. His eyes were storm gray, the color of the sky before lightning strikes. When they found her, she felt recognized in a way that terrified her more than Douglas ever had. Luca Castellano had survived 15 years in a world that destroyed most men by the age of 30. He had done it by never being surprised. By anticipating. By moving one step ahead of everyone else. But in this moment, with a desperate woman covered in blood crashing through the curtain, something in his chest shifted. A recognition that went deeper than sight. He had seen this woman before. 2 weeks ago. On a dusty Las Vegas street. She had pulled his daughter Emma from traffic without hesitating, without thinking of her own safety. He had tried to reward her and she had refused. She had smiled sadly and walked away, and he had not been able to stop thinking about her since. Douglas crashed through the curtain behind Aria, his face flushed with anger and exertion. When he saw the men, the guns, the power that filled the room like smoke, he hesitated for only a second. Then his face rearranged itself into something that looked like a smile. "Hey," he said, spreading his hands. "This is nothing, guys. Just a domestic thing. My girlfriend got a little dramatic, you know how women are." Aria's chest was heaving. Blood dripped steadily from her temple. She did not look at Douglas. She looked at the man at the head table, and what she saw in his face made her act on pure survival instinct. She grabbed a whiskey glass from a passing server and hurled it. It shattered against the wall behind Douglas, shards raining down like ice. Then she raised her hand. And she slapped Luca Castellano across the face, hard enough that the sound echoed like a gunshot in the absolute silence of the room. The silence that followed was the silence of 30 men processing something that should not exist. Their boss, the man who had killed for less than words spoken, had been struck by a bleeding woman in a torn uniform. And he did not move. Luca touched his reddened cheek slowly. His eyes, when they found hers, were not angry. They were something else entirely. Recognition. Understanding. And something that looked like the beginning of mercy. "Vinny," he said quietly. "Take Mr. Hale outside. Find out who he works for." Vinny and Nino moved like machines that had been waiting for exactly this instruction. They flanked Douglas, their hands moving toward the interior of their jackets. Douglas's face went pale. He tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go except toward the men whose purpose was to ensure he understood what it meant to be a problem that needed solving. Luca stood slowly and walked toward Aria. She should have been afraid. Every instinct should have told her to run. But she was already running. She was already terrified. And this man, this powerful, scarred man with storm-gray eyes, was standing between her and the door. Between her and Douglas. Between her and another night of being hunted. "Nino," Luca said. "Get the doctor. Now." Aria's knees buckled. The room began to tilt. "I just need someone to see," she whispered. "I just need someone to see so he can't deny it. So he can't claim I fell or—" Her vision went black. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. She felt herself being lifted, felt the warmth of a body that smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, something that belonged to the underground. She heard Luca's voice, calm and steady, speaking the kind of orders that men obeyed immediately. "Get the car," he said. "And cancel my morning meetings. She's coming with us." As her consciousness slipped away, Aria heard the warehouse door opening. She heard the October wind howling outside. She heard footsteps, many footsteps, moving in coordinated patterns. And she heard Luca's voice one more time, so close it might have been a prayer. "You're safe now. I have you." 6 days after the slap that changed everything, Douglas Hale appeared at the mansion gates like a ghost that refused to be buried. He was drunk, his shirt torn, his face a landscape of bruises and desperation. His voice cracked as he screamed her name into the October night. "Aria! Aria, I know you're in there. Come out here. You think you can hide from me?" The security guards moved forward, but Luca was already there, stepping onto the front steps in a black cashmere coat that cost more than Douglas's entire yearly salary. His men materialized from the shadows like they had been waiting for exactly this moment. Vinny and Nino flanked the gates, their movements precise, economical, the movements of men who understood violence the way musicians understood rhythm. "You're trespassing," Luca said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, and it carried across the darkness without him raising it at all. Douglas's eyes went wild. "She's mine. She belongs to me. You can't just take her. I own her." "You own nothing," Luca replied. "Not anymore." Aria stood behind him in the doorway, wrapped in a sweater that belonged to Emma. She watched as Vinny and Nino moved toward Douglas with the kind of casual purpose that made his knees buckle. They didn't hit him. They didn't need to. The simple fact of their approach was a language Douglas understood perfectly. "Get him off the property," Luca said quietly. What happened next unfolded like a choreography of control. Douglas was lifted, half carried, half dragged toward the gates. His screaming continued, but the words became incoherent, just raw animal sound disappearing into the Las Vegas night. The gates closed with a soft metallic click that sounded like a promise. Luca turned back toward Aria. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her hands were trembling. "He said Victoria owns this city. He said she'll bury both of us." Something shifted in Luca's expression, a tightening at the corners of his mouth. He took Aria's arm gently and led her back inside. The mansion swallowed them both. Behind them, the October wind picked up, rattling the gates like something trying to break free. That night, Luca's private phone rang at 11:43 p.m. The number was blocked. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering. When he did, he activated the speaker and nodded for Aria to listen from across the room. The voice that came through was silk wrapped around steel. Victoria Ashford's accent was old money, old power, the kind of voice that had never been refused anything in her entire life. "Mr. Castellano, I understand you're harboring something that belongs to one of my associates. A woman named Aria Hartley. Douglas has been overzealous, I admit. But she did steal from him." "She stole nothing," Luca said. A pause. In that pause was the sound of Victoria Ashford realizing that she was speaking to someone who would not break. "Then there's been a misunderstanding. Send her home, and we'll forget this unpleasantness. I'm being generous. You should accept." "No." The silence that followed was worse than any threat. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had dropped 10 degrees in temperature. "You're making a grave mistake. I've destroyed bigger men than you for considerably less. I have judges in my pocket. Police commissioners. Federal prosecutors. I own this city, Mr. Castellano. You're just a man who thinks he owns a small corner of it." "Try," Luca said. He ended the call. The dial tone hummed like a held breath. Aria's face had gone pale. "She's going to come after us. After Emma. Oh God, she's going to come after your daughter." "Emma is safe," Luca said. But his jaw was tight, and his eyes held something cold and dangerous that hadn't been there before. The next morning, Aria's old phone buzzed. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. When she answered, the voice belonged to her former landlord, a man named Robert Chen who had always been kind to her, who had given her extra time when she was late on rent. "Miss Hartley? I'm so sorry. I have to tell you the foreclosure is final. Your belongings are already on the street. I had no choice in the matter. Someone came to the bank, paid off your notice with additional fees, and then immediately filed for new foreclosure paperwork. The total owed is now $47,000. Aria's hand shook. But Mr. Castellano paid $22,000. He paid it. There were additional assessments filed. Legal fees, administrative costs, emergency property taxes. I'm sorry. It's completely out of my hands." She hung up and walked to find Luca in his study. He was reading, but he set the book down immediately when he saw her face. "Victoria," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded grimly. "She's escalating. Testing my response. Showing you what she can do." That night, the cold settled deep into Las Vegas, the kind of October cold that promised winter was coming whether anyone was ready or not. Aria found herself standing in the mansion garden, her breath visible in the darkness, dead leaves swirling around her feet like whispers of every failure she had accumulated in 27 years. Her grandmother's recipe book was in her hands. The leather cover was worn soft from decades of use. Inside, the margins were filled with her grandmother's handwriting, not just recipes but philosophy, wisdom, love written in fading blue ink. This was the only piece of her past still intact, the only thing Victoria Ashford hadn't been able to take, and even that felt fragile, temporary. Aria had lost the house. The small inheritance her grandmother had left her, gone. Her independence, swallowed. She was hiding in a stranger's mansion, playing house with his daughter, sleeping in silk sheets in rooms that cost more than her entire life used to cost. She had traded one cage for another. The bars were just gilded now. Douglas was still out there somewhere, nursing his bruises and his rage. Victoria Ashford was circling, testing defenses, learning patterns. And Emma, beautiful, innocent Emma, who had started calling her Miss Aria with a hope in her voice that broke something in Aria's chest every single time. She opened the recipe book. Her grandmother's handwriting blurred through tears. Make good bread, her grandmother had written. Make it with care and with love, and even poor people will feel like they're eating a miracle. What would her grandmother say about her now? That she was strong. That she was a fighter. But Aria was so tired of fighting. Tired in the bone-deep way that came from never catching a break, never having mercy, never getting to rest. A single red leaf drifted down through the October darkness and landed directly on her grandmother's handwriting. Aria watched it settle there, this tiny thing carried by wind it could never control, moving exactly where the current decided to take it. She had been like that leaf for so long. Carried by Douglas's violence. Blown by poverty's wind. Pushed by circumstances that felt inevitable as gravity. But then she grabbed a whiskey glass. She raised her hand. She slapped a man in front of 30 witnesses and refused to apologize. She closed the recipe book carefully and tucked the leaf inside between 2 pages. I'm still here, she whispered to the November wind. I'm still here. The next morning, Luca called her into his study. Aria's heart began to race before he even spoke. She knew that expression. She had seen it on men in dark suits before. Federal agents have been investigating Victoria Ashford for 2 years, he said quietly. Racketeering, bribery of public officials, money laundering. They have evidence, but they need one ironclad case to move forward. Douglas is the weak link. If he breaks, he can testify to her entire operation. All her connections, all her crimes, everything. How? Aria asked. You press charges. Assault. Stalking. Attempted murder. With federal backing, the local police can't bury it like Victoria buried everything else. Douglas will panic. He'll run to Victoria, trying to fix it through his usual channels. And when he does, he'll walk right into a federal trap they've been setting for months. Aria felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear. Something harder than fear. When? She asked. Tonight. Can you do this? Aria stood. She stood very straight. She thought of her grandmother's handwriting. She thought of Emma's voice saying Miss Aria with hope. She thought of every poor woman who had ever been told she was nothing, she was nobody, she deserved what happened to her. Yes, she said. Let's do it. At 5:51 a.m. on a cold November morning, federal agents surrounded Douglas Hale's apartment building. 12 men in tactical gear, weapons drawn, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that came from years of practice. The battering ram hit the door and it exploded inward like the door had been holding its breath the whole time. Douglas stumbled out of bed screaming. What the hell? What are you doing? You can't do this. An agent slammed him against the wall. His face pressed into the cold plaster. His hands were cuffed behind his back in 2 seconds flat. Douglas Hale, you're under arrest for assault, stalking, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. Douglas's face went white as bone. No. No, no, no. Victoria will fix this. She always fixes this. She has judges. She has? Victoria Ashford is being arrested as we speak, the agent said. The color drained completely from Douglas's face. He went limp like a puppet with its strings cut. I want a deal. I'll tell you everything. Everything she's done. The bribes. The murders. The whole network. Just please don't let Castellano's men touch me. They dragged him out of his apartment in handcuffs. News cameras flashed in the hallway. By 7:06 a.m., his face was on every news channel in Nevada. At the same moment, federal agents were moving through Victoria Ashford's estate like water, finding every crack in the foundation. She was at breakfast in a room with 14-foot ceilings and windows overlooking the entire city. A silk robe that cost $8,000. Coffee in a cup that had been hand-painted in Italy. She looked up from her newspaper like someone had interrupted her reading a particularly dull article. 12 agents in tactical gear. Weapons visible. No ambiguity about what they were. Victoria set down her coffee cup with careful precision. Do you have a warrant? The lead agent stepped forward and showed it to her. She read it like she was reading a menu she had no intention of ordering from. Victoria Ashford, you're under arrest for racketeering, bribery of public officials, conspiracy to commit murder, and money laundering. This is absurd, Victoria said. I have lawyers. Multiple lawyers. This will be dismissed before lunch. Your lawyers are being arrested too, the agent said. Douglas Hale is testifying against you. It's over. For the first time in her life, Victoria Ashford's composure cracked like a dropped mirror. She lunged for her phone and an agent intercepted her. They cuffed her wrists behind her back and led her toward the door. She didn't scream. Didn't beg. Just walked with her back straight, her face set like stone. But in the driveway, as they loaded her into a federal van, she saw Luca Castellano standing across the street. Aria was beside him, her hand in his. And in that moment, Victoria understood that she had lost everything, not to violence, but to a woman who had decided she would not be nobody anymore. Federal prison. 40 years minimum. Every asset seized. Every official she had corrupted exposed and arrested one by one. Her empire dismantled brick by brick, not through revenge, but through the careful, methodical application of the law. The storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think. 1 week after the federal agents took Victoria Ashford away, Aria sat in a courtroom with pale yellow walls and a judge whose name she would never remember. Douglas Hale stood before the bench in an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. He had lost weight in the holding cell. His hair was unwashed. And when he turned to look at the gallery where Aria sat, she saw nothing in his eyes but the recognition of a man watching his entire existence collapse into a single 40-year sentence. The judge read the terms. 40 years. No parole. Restitution ordered. Supervised release following imprisonment that would extend into the year 2064, when Douglas Hale would be 92 years old if he lived that long. The gavel struck like thunder. Aria felt no triumph. No relief. No vindication. Just the quiet, certain knowledge that she would never have to sleep with her door locked again. Never have to hear his footsteps in the darkness. Never have to calculate whether her body was worth more to him than his freedom. He mouthed something at her as the guards led him away, an apology or a curse, she could not tell. She did not care. He was gone. The courtroom entered slowly. Journalists clustered outside asking questions she did not answer. Luca waited by the courthouse steps, still in his black suit, still moving like a man who owned the sidewalk. Vinny stood 6 feet behind him. Nino checked his phone with the casual distraction of someone whose only worry was whether the parking meter had expired. Aria descended the stone steps toward them. The November sun was weak and distant. Her breath made small clouds in the cold air. It's finished, Luca said. Is it? Aria's voice sounded different now. Steadier. Like someone who had learned that speaking cost nothing and silence had always been expensive. Victoria's trial starts in 3 weeks. She will spend the rest of her life in federal prison, Luca said. 23 corrupt officials arrested. 5 judges disbarred. An entire network dismantled. She built an empire on the backs of men she could threaten. Now there is no one left to threaten. They drove through the city toward the house Aria had almost lost. The foreclosure notice had been on her kitchen table for 93 days. She had circled the date in red pen like she was marking a countdown to execution. Now the deed was changing hands. Now she was taking her life back, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. When they pulled up to the small house with the sagging gutters and the chain-link fence, Aria saw that someone had repaired the porch steps. The front door had been painted. Window boxes had been installed, empty now but waiting for spring. "The debt is paid," Luca said. "All $47,000. I have also covered property taxes for 5 years and arranged for necessary repairs. The house is yours free and clear." Aria stared at him. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed what she would say, constructed an entire argument about independence and pride and the refusal to be anyone's charity case. But standing in front of her own house, truly her own, she found the words would not come. "I will pay you back," she finally managed. "Every penny. I don't care how long it takes." "I know you will," Luca said. He reached into his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope. "But you won't be cleaning hotel rooms to do it." Aria opened the envelope. Inside was a letter on expensive paper with the Castellano Enterprises logo embossed across the top. She read the words. Administrative position. Salary $48,000 per year. Health insurance. Dental. A 401k that most people could only dream about. "You don't have to," Luca said quietly. "But you could. Why would you do this?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Because you saved Emma without knowing who I was. Because you chose courage when you had $5 left. Because I want to." Aria folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest like it might vanish if she loosened her grip. "I need time." "I know," Luca said. "Take as much as you need." 3 months passed like pages turning in a book. Aria accepted the job. She worked in an office on the 42nd floor of a downtown building where the elevators opened onto views of the entire desert spreading toward the horizon. She managed logistics for legitimate businesses, a hotel chain, a restaurant group, a construction company that built homes for people who had never been homeless. She saw Luca at work often. Professional. Respectful. He never touched her except to shake her hand. He never asked personal questions. He respected every boundary she built, and with each boundary she built and he honored, she began to understand that respect was the truest form of affection she had ever known. One evening in February, Aria stayed late to finish quarterly reports. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew. She walked past Luca's corner suite to use the printer and saw something on his desk, a child's drawing, crayon on white paper, the colors bright and purposeful. She stopped. She picked it up. 3 figures. One tall labeled Daddy in wobbly letters. One small labeled Lemma with wild hair sticking out in all directions. And between them, a figure labeled Aria holding both their hands. Luca's voice came from the doorway. She had not heard him approach. "She drew that 2 weeks ago," he said. "I asked her to draw our family. That's what she drew." Aria turned. Luca stood in the doorway in a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. In the fluorescent light she could see the small scars on his forearms, the marks of a life lived in violence and survival. "She asks about you constantly," Luca continued. "When are you coming to dinner? When will you read to her again? She's made a list of books for you to choose from." "I can come this weekend," Aria said softly. The offer felt enormous and terrifying and right. "She would like that," Luca said. Their eyes met in the silence of the empty office. The sound of the city hummed through the windows, distant traffic, the ambient noise of thousands of people living their lives 40 stories below. Something unspoken passed between them, a negotiation happening in the space where words had become unnecessary. But Aria did not yet understand that Luca had spent these 3 months ensuring her safety in ways she would never fully know. That his investigators had mapped every angle of her life, neutralizing threats before they materialized. That he had rebuilt his own existence around the edges of hers, waiting for the moment she would be ready to stand beside him as an equal instead of a rescued person. 6 months after she slapped him in front of 30 armed men, Aria had repaid half of Luca's loan. She made the payment in a wire transfer with a memo line that read with gratitude. She was thriving. She had negotiated her own contracts. She had earned respect from people who once looked through her as though she were made of air. October came back around. 1 year since the night she crashed through velvet curtains with a bleeding temple and $5 in her pocket. Luca asked her to dinner. Not at the mansion. Not surrounded by his men. Just the two of them on the terrace at sunset, the temperature mild now, the desert wind carrying heat instead of cutting cold. Emma was with a nanny, the first time Luca had arranged for Aria and himself alone in months. The city lights were beginning to glow beneath them as dusk turned to evening. "I need to tell you something," Luca said. His voice was steady but something underneath it trembled. 1 year ago, you slapped me in front of 30 armed men. You had no idea who I was. You were desperate enough to demand that someone witness your suffering. I remember, Aria whispered. You saved my daughter without asking for anything, he continued. You rebuilt your life from $78 and a grandmother's recipe book. You stood in a federal courtroom and faced down the man who terrorized you. You've repaid half a debt you didn't even owe. And in all of this, you learned something I have spent 15 years trying to understand. He reached into his pocket. A small box appeared in his hand. He opened it and inside was a ring, not ostentatious, but beautiful, a single stone set in white gold, the kind of ring a woman could wear to work without drawing attention, the kind of ring that meant something profound and permanent. You're not nobody, Aria, Luca said. You never were. And I don't want to protect you anymore. I want to stand beside you. If you'll let me. Aria looked at this man who could have destroyed her. Who chose to save her instead? Who waited months for her to be ready? Who respected every boundary she set even when respecting boundaries cost him something? I'll let you, she said. He kissed her there on the terrace with Las Vegas glittering below them like a promise. Inside the mansion, Emma pressed her face against the glass and cheered. Through the windows, Luca heard Vinny and Nino laughing, Nino handing over $200 because he had finally won the bet on how long it would take. The storm passed. The sky cleared. And Aria Hartley, who had once counted change to buy bread, who had slept in a car, who had almost lost everything, stood in a mansion she no longer needed to clean, holding the hand of a man who saw her as an equal, building a life not because she was rescued, but because she was strong enough to rescue herself. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories coming tomorrow. Leave a comment telling us about a time you stood up for yourself against impossible odds. We read every single one. Every comment is a reminder that your voice matters. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.